Director of the Nature Conservancy in Rhode Island, and I would like to welcome you all to tonight's presentation on fishers in Rhode Island. We're all here because these are amazing animals, and they're elusive animals. And what I learned a little bit in chatting with Laken before we began tonight is that fishers really prefer intact contiguous forest, like the places Nature Conservancy has worked so hard with our partners to conserve, especially in the western part of the state, where we have these relatively vast connected forests with continuous overhead cover. And I learned from Laken that fishers are quite adaptable, and we're finding them in a lot of different places, but this is their preferred habitat. And it's really important habitat for so many species of animals and plants that are important in Rhode Island. I have seen a few fishers in my lifetime, and every time it's totally amazing. And after seeing this report, I'm amazed at how distributed they are at the Nature Conservancy's preserves in Rhode Island, the things that happen, at nighttime when many of us don't have the opportunity to be there. This webinar is part of a monthly engagement series for our conservation partners, our loyal donors, our Legacy Club members, and folks who provide essential support to make this kind of work happen. Most of the monthly events that we do happen out on the preserves, but in January, sometimes it's better to do it from the comfort of our own homes. So we're staying inside tonight with this presentation. The Nature Conservancy of Rhode Island has 25 great preserves for you to get out on to hike and explore and wildlife watch. There are also a number of active research stations like piping plover and least tern nesting, monitoring Goosewing Beach Preserve, Little Compton, the work that we do on the endangered American burying beetle out on Block Island, work on the American woodcock and whippoorwill at the Carter Preserve, bird banding that we do at two different permanent stations on Block Island. We have a long time series on Block Island of the avian visitors. And fishers at the Carter Preserve and the Moshassuck River Preserve, which is our newest nature preserve, the Nature Conservancy we'll hear about tonight. In addition to the research that we conduct on our preserves, the science staff of the Nature Conservancy is very active in things like juvenile finfish surveys in the Providence River estuary, doing fish and other marine life surveys on Block Island. Putting that. We're doing monitoring on the impact of constructed reefs up in the upper Narragansett Bay. And we're partners as TNC on several pilot studies to measure and showcase nature-based solutions for urban and climate challenges, like partnering with the Audubon Society of Rhode Island and Roger Williams Park on the Stormwater Innovation Center that's in Providence, partnering with NOAA, CRMC, and URI to install a nature-based coastal erosion control structure and living shoreline, and that's at Rose Larissa Park in East Providence, partnering with Wood Pawcatuck Watershed Association and Rhode Island DEM Fish and Wildlife to survey cold water fish habitats like the many streams and brooks that we have in the Wood Pawcatuck Wild and Scenic Area watersheds. Tonight, we are very fortunate to be hearing from Laken Ganoe, a PhD student at University of Rhode Island, studying fishers at various sites in Rhode Island, including several TNC preserves. Laken works in the lab of Professor Brian Gerber in the Applied Quantitative Ecology Lab and has been working since June 2020 on the Rhode Island Fishers Project in partnership with Rhode Island DEM. And now I will hand it over to Catherine Campbell, who will describe the format for tonight. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, JT. I'm Catherine Campbell, Associate Director of Philanthropy, and I have been working closely with our conservation staff to put together our monthly donor engagement series to share with you what your support makes possible. We're really excited to have over 80 participants joining us for this webinar tonight. It's really exciting. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from folks as they RSVP. To go over a bit of housekeeping, you're all muted, so we don't have to have any background noise. You can put your questions in the Q&A chat box down at the bottom of your screen, and we will be monitoring those questions, and we're going to hold on to those questions until the end, so we won't break Laken's presentation flow And likely she might answer some of your questions as she's going along. I will be recording the webinar tonight and will share with participants later this week or early next week. So I would like to hand things over to Laken, who will give us an introduction to our work and a land acknowledgement before digging into the presentation. Thanks, Laken.
Thank you both. All right, let's get the presentation up here. All right, can you all see that? Awesome. Cool. So thank you for having me tonight. Thanks for joining. It's kind of nice that we get to sit in our cozy homes and learn a little bit about Fisher tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to get rid of this and start the presentation. So my name is Laken Ganoe. I'm a PhD student at University of Rhode Island. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project that we're working on that we are calling the Rhode Island Fisher Study. So there we go. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that the work that is being done is on the lands of the Pequot, Nipmuc, Niantic, Narragansett, and Wampanoag peoples, and that as we continue towards our conservation goals, we keep in mind the traditional values of those peoples whose land that we are working on. So keep those in mind as we strive towards those conservation goals. So a little bit about myself. I did my undergraduate degree at a small state school in Pennsylvania called California University of Pennsylvania, where I studied fisheries and wildlife. There I got the opportunity to go out west to California to study fisher and martin in the Sierra Nevadas. I brought some of that information back, did an undergraduate thesis in Pennsylvania using what we call hair snares and some trail cameras to study fisher in the county where I grew up. And then this all allowed me some experience that got me a job as a master's student at Penn State, where I worked with muskrat. We were looking at their movement ecology as well as the disease component. And there I got to work with a bunch of different species on a lot of different research projects and just gain a lot of really great field experience that all kind of accumulated in me getting my dream job right now. So right now I'm getting to work with Fisher. I've never gotten to handle Fisher before this project. It's always been a dream of mine since I was young. My first encounter with a Fisher was during archery season. One caught a chipmunk and ran up the tree beside my tree stand, sat there eating it. I had no idea what it was. And that kind of sparked my interest in Fisher. We found out that they were recolonizing Pennsylvania. And it was just really cool to see the population kind of start to expand to where we live. So the Rhode Island Fisher Study is a collaborative project between the University of Rhode Island and the Department of Environmental Management, Fish and Wildlife Division. It's all funded through the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program. And we get to go out, set cameras up, go through some live trapping, and then actually track the animals. And I'll get into this a little bit later. But first, some background about the study itself. Why Rhode Island? Why are we interested in studying animals here? Well, Rhode Island is the second most densely populated state. With that, you don't really think about wildlife being in those areas, but that's why it's so important to study them here. And despite all of that rapid urbanization, we do an amazing job conserving our natural areas. So over 20% of the state is conservation lands. So whether that's local, state, or federal lands, those are our preserves there in yellow on the map. I know Block Island isn't on here, but there's also preserves on Block Island as well. And I just wanted to highlight, we're focusing on the 3 main counties on mainland Rhode Island for this study. So because of these conservation efforts, we've seen the return of several different species, including beaver and fisher. And of course, I'm going to be focusing on fisher for this presentation. What do we know about fisher? Well, they are native to Rhode Island. They're native to most of New England. They were over-harvested in the 1800s and in the early 1900s. There was also a lot of deforestation going on. There wasn't habitat to support the population, so they were became locally extinct. And then they started returning naturally in the 1980s. They were not reintroduced. A lot of people think that they were, but they were not. They came in naturally from Connecticut and Massachusetts with the base foundation of the populations coming from Vermont area, Vermont and New Hampshire. So with them returning to the state, so did their reputation. So what do you think of when you hear a fisher cat, as we like to call them here? Well, the three main things that I get when I talk to people is they're very scary and aggressive cats. They scream really loud at night. Everyone always says, oh, I heard one in the backyard. And that they're out to kill our pets' livestock. Well, I'm here today to kind of shed light on those misconceptions. A lot of these photos that'll be in the presentation are from the work that we're doing. So I'd like you to meet one of our juvenile females that we caught last year. Her name's Meatloaf. And she'd like you to know some things about Fisher. So they're scary and aggressive cats. Well, they're not actually a cat, they're a weasel. So that's one big thing I'd like you to take home tonight is that they're actually weasels. So we say fisher cats, but really it's Fisher. That cat tag at the end just kind of got added on and it starts adding to these misconceptions. So I just want to show you 3 pictures of different weasels that we have in the state using the same log from one of our camera traps. So the top photo is a fisher, and then a mink in the second one, and a long-tailed weasel on the bottom. So these guys are all weasels. They're all in the same kind of family group. And so fisher are a weasel, not a cat. They're not innately aggressive. So what I mean by this is, yes, they are predators, but they are not an aggressive animal that is going to seek out blood and vengeance. If you think about how hippos will attack without being provoked, fisher will not do that. They're pretty elusive and shy. They don't want anything to do with people, but if you corner them, yes, they're going to defend themselves. And you would be lucky to see one. So I always say this at these presentations, and about a dozen hands will go up in the room saying they saw a fisher, which is shocking because growing up, I've only seen a couple. And I think because Rhode Island, the natural areas are so condensed down that you're more likely to see a lot of wildlife here because that's the only places that they can live. So if you see one, enjoy the view because they probably won't watch them for very long. They'll normally just run off. I wanted to share some videos with you from the individuals that we captured on TNC property last winter. These animals have recovered from the sedation that we give them. We put them in a dog kennel so they can recover safely. We make sure they have all of their movement back before we release them into the wild, make sure they're ready to go. And this is how they behave. So this first one is Bowie. He is an adult male. They're both adult males, but they're very calm. They just kind of sit and watch. They are weasels. They're very curious. So you'll see that with the second guy. This is Beetlejuice. Comes up and gives me a sniff. And then he kind of backs off here, just sniffing around. So they're curious. They're not attacking the cage. They're not growling at us. They're not freaking out. They just kind of hang out in there. Most of the time they're scared and they're hiding in the back. The first year of the study, we actually got to work with trappers, and if they caught one, they wanted to be part of the study. We went up, processed it, put a collar on it, and let it go. So this is one of the little guys that we caught up in Foster, sitting in the trap that he was caught in. And as you can see, as we approach, he leans backward, puts his paw up, he's afraid. So they're not innately aggressive. As I said, they're not trying to attack us. They just kind of want to get away. So the next thing that we always get is fisher screaming in the woods at night. So you've all probably heard this in your backyard. So that's actually not a fisher, that's a fox. That is another thing I'd really love you to take away from this when someone says, oh yeah, the fisher cats are screaming out back. It's not a fisher, it's a fox, and it's usually a gray fox. I'd like to share with you a video of a red fox. They make a very similar sound. Foxes are pretty playful animals. So this is one that has a playful fox over here. And if you notice, if you look up a lot of fisher sounds online, there's never a video of the animal actually making the noise. So that should be an indication to you that maybe we shouldn't trust that information. So there's also a lot of other animals that make crazy noises in the woods. I wanted to share two with you. So bobcats can make a lot of wild sounds, especially during mating season. So these are two bobcats yelling at each other. So you can imagine walking through the woods hearing that at night would be a little freaky. So that's a bobcat. They also make a bunch of different noises. Raccoons do as well. And oftentimes we don't think about our bird friends. So barn owls can make this high-pitched screeching sound. This is one that was taught by a rehab center. And I wanted to share this sound with you. So he's not very happy. Sorry if that was really loud on your end, but that is the sound that a barn owl makes. So you might be saying, okay, Laken, well then what sound does a fisher make? Well, I will show you. So we are fortunate enough to work with these animals and be able to spend some time with them in the woods. And I've recorded a couple sounds that they make. Their main sound, well, basically the only sound that they make that we've heard them is this. So this first one's going to be a male that we caught up in, he was in foster as well. This is Clyde. So that's the sound a fisher makes. There's this deep kind of guttural sound that we call a fisher chuckle. So that's the males. Theirs is a lot deeper than the females. This next video is going to be of a female. She is very chatty. So our females tend to be more chatty than the males. So that's a sound a fisher makes. So when somebody asks you about fisher and they say about them screaming in the woods, you can say, no, I saw these videos. They don't scream in the woods. They make this kind of chuckle sound. So the last misconception that we hear is they're going to eat my pets and chickens. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Fishers are predators. They are predators. They do need to eat for a living, and they're very good at what they do. But we also have a lot of other predators in Rhode Island that can harm your animals, including coyote. We have both species of fox. We have bobcats, raccoons, long-tailed weasels, and all the birds of prey and fisher. So we have a lot of things out there that if they're given the opportunity and one of the animals is sick, or if your chicken coop is open and it's a fast food drive-through for them to get their chicken nuggets, they're going to take advantage of that. But we got to remember about what they have evolved to kill and to eat. Fisher have evolved to kill and eat squirrels, rabbits. They also are the main predator of porcupines. When we think about our pets, like our cats and our dogs, they are also predators, and they're going to fight back. And so that has a lot of cost to it. If an animal, especially one of our predators here in Rhode Island, is trying to take down another predator, that's pretty costly. They're going to prefer to go with the rabbits and the squirrels. So I wanted to share with you some photos of fisher that we've got with different prey items. So in the top left corner is a fisher with a rabbit. Top right is a fisher with a gray squirrel. The bottom left is a fisher with a long-tailed weasel. And then the last photo is a big male that had scavenged a deer leg from a hunter's carcass. And so what I really want you to focus in on, especially, is that gray squirrel photo. Look at the size of the gray squirrel compared to the fisher. And then think about the size of your house cat. House cat's pretty big. So that is a hard meal for a fisher to take down. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying it's very, very unlikely. Coyotes and bobcats will most likely attack a cat if there's something that's going to attack your cat. But just keep these photos in mind. And keep in mind that it's your responsibility to take care of your animals. So I like to say that a proactive owner is a protective owner. There's lots of ways we can keep our pets safe because they're relying on us to provide them with a safe environment to live in, right? So for your chicken coops, if you haven't heard of this before, I'm sure a lot of you that have chicken coops have heard of this, to install a predator blanket or a predator apron. You'll see that in the photo. So you dig down into the ground about 3 inches and then out about 8 inches. And then you cover that all in with dirt, and that prevents things from digging under your chicken coop and getting in, especially the weasels and the foxes. You also want to make sure that you have the top of your coop firmly secure because they can climb, and we also have avian predators as well that will try to get into your coop. I always think about baby proofing your chicken coop. If you think about raccoons, they've got those little hands and they can undo anything. So think about that whenever you're looking at your coops, and conduct those regular security checks to make sure there's no easy way for animals to get in. What about your cats? This is a comment that I get a lot from people, that their cat will have a better life if they're able to wander through the woods and come and go as they please, like a natural animal. But actually, we're putting our cats at risk whenever we let them outside roam freely. Not only to all those predators that I mentioned, but also to human-related risks, such as traffic. They might get hit by a car, construction hazards. There might be holes in the ground or pipes that they can get stuck in, or other humans that don't like your cat walking through their yard. Sadly, that is something that we have to think about. And the last thing is disease. So cats not only can transmit disease to wildlife, but they can get disease from wildlife, bring it into your house, and then some of these diseases can be transferred to humans. So not only will it keep your cat healthier, it'll keep you healthier, and it'll keep everybody happy. I know a lot of friends that now walk their cats on leashes, or they have catios. There's lots of options that you can do for your cat to enjoy outside, but also to keep them safe. So lastly, what about my dog? Well, a lot of negative wildlife interactions actually instigated by the dog. If you have a dog, you know that they don't respect your personal space. So they don't respect wildlife's personal space either. And that is whenever those negative interactions happen. When an animal is in the woods or getting chased by a dog and they feel cornered, that's when they're going to attack out of self-defense. So the first thing you can do is train them not to harass wildlife. Don't let them chase the squirrels in your yard. Don't let them get used to being, oh, I'm going to run as soon as something else starts running. If they don't respond well to training, keep them on a leash. There's a lot of natural areas in Rhode Island that actually require you to keep your pets on a leash. And some of them, like Audubon Society, don't even allow pets on the property for this reason and to maintain the trails and keep them clean. So those are some things that you could do to protect your pets and your livestock from all the predators that we have running around, and we can kind of coexist with them. So recapping this whole first portion of the presentation, fisher are very elusive and timid. They're not terrifying, super aggressive animals. They're going to attack you. They're going to avoid you. They're not cats. They're weasels. They don't make that screaming sound at night. That's gray fox. They make that soft chuckle in their throat. And they're not killing machines for pets' skins. They're killing machines for squirrels and rabbits. That's what they have evolved to do. And that is what they are best at. And that's what they get the most nutrition from. And remember, a proactive owner is a protective owner. Great. So now that we've corrected some of those misconceptions about Fisher, I'm going to jump into some of the really cool things that we found from the study so far. So we are in the third year. This is the third and final year of fieldwork, sadly. So I'll be stuck in the office all next year, writing and doing analyses, which I'm going to miss the field component for sure. So I will start with our trapping and tagging. So we do this across the state. We have tagged 44 Fisher so far. This year we're at number 5. We actually got 2 yesterday out in Richmond. So if you see a Fisher run around with a collar out there, that's one of ours. Our crew, we process them at the site and we release them right back at the same exact place where we caught them on the same exact day. So we handle them for about an hour and then we let them wake up, make sure they're recovered. That takes about another hour and then we let them go. So you can see in the top left corner, that's a picture of one of the male collars. In the photo below that is a female wearing her smaller collar. So they're 2 different sizes because the females need to be a lot smaller so they can fit into their little den tree. And these are some photos from some other things during the capture. So as you can see on the right side, these are 2 different individuals, our largest male on the left, Lobster, and our smallest female on the right, Sandy. So the size difference between males and females is humongous, especially from the smaller end of our females to our larger end of our males. The males have that teddy bear head and the females have more of that pointy weasel face. We age them through their teeth. So we can look at tooth wear, like on the left side of the slide. You can see a juvenile on the top and an old adult on the bottom. But we also do pull a tooth. If we know it's not juvenile, the teeth aren't super sharp and pointy and nice and bright white, we will pull a tooth. So we'll pull that first tooth behind their big canine, that little tiny tooth. They don't really need it, but that's how we can properly age them. There's no other way to properly age them to the year. So take that tooth in the lab, cut it in half, do a cross section, little shave a piece and look at it under a microscope, and then you count the rings like you would on a tree to see how old the animal is. So the one on the bottom, we thought he was going to be super old. He had basically no teeth left. We thought he was going to be about 8 years old. He's only 4. So they live a pretty harsh life here in Rhode Island. We have a lot of 2-year-olds that also have really bad tooth wear. Not sure why, but compared to ones out west, they have a lot of gum disease here. So we also get to handle a lot of different individuals and see a lot of cool coloration on their pelts. So these are all different animals. You can see on the left are 2 big males. The 3 vertical ones are females. And they all have different variations of white markings, white blazes on their chest and their groin that are all very unique. They also have very different pelt colors. So you can see Sandy on the far left is super blonde. The one right beside her is really dark, but they all have these really jet black dark paws, really long tail. They're super fluffy in the wintertime. In the summer, they'll thin out and get kind of like a monkey tail, is what we call it. And you can see size difference here. So big male on the right side and the other 3 are females. So that male, he's got a lot more girth to him. And then just wanted to share some pictures of their paws because I always love their paws when we're on a capture. In the middle, you'll see this is a back paw. You'll see those dots on the paw pad. Those are scent glands, so that they leave scent markings as they walk through the woods. And it's really cool to see them on their back paws. Once we've processed them, we give them little ear tags. We give them what's called a pit tag, which is like a microchip that you would put in your dog or your cat. You give them one of those and a collar and let them go. And here's a release video of Connie. She was also caught at Cuddy Hunk up in Exeter. She was a pregnant female. She actually had 3 kits that she was raising. So they run out with this fancy collar on, and we get the data back whenever we go out into the woods. And what does it look like? So on the left side is all of the data points that we have for our fisher that we've captured. There's a lot overlap in some of the areas, but I want to play for you this graphic and it'll show you how they move throughout the year. So to show you the first year, they'll transition into the next year. So each dot is a different individual. And so they show up as we capture them. Oops, sorry. This is April, into May. And so collars started dying. The batteries don't last too long on them because they're so small. They're not like a deer collar that can last for a couple years. Getting near August now, and this last collar lasted till August, down below Warden Pond. And then now we're transitioning into last year's collars. So that yellow dot was a female. She did a 100-mile trip in 2 weeks and went right back to where we caught her. So yeah, that's where all of our fishers are that we have caught, and how they've been moving across the landscape. So I'm going to zoom in on just two of them. So this is the male down at Warden Pond. His name's Linus, or MO1 if you want to use a scientific name. He hung out right below the pond, avoiding those developed areas, and then did a trip up to campus on a weekend to party, came back down, and then hung out down there, mainly in the wetlands, in those kind of forested wetlands down there. And yeah, so he was an adult male that we caught at Pesquisette Pond. And then I wanted to show you two different individuals, so a male and a female, so you can see the difference in their home ranges. So the female is in pink, the male is in blue. You can see the female's home range is about a third the size of the male's. Not very big at all. She doesn't move around too much. She was a pregnant female, so she was hanging mainly around her den tree. So that is one really cool thing that we have with these collars is we're able to locate the female's dens. And we put up some cameras. So this was the first footage that I have ever gotten of the female and her kits. These are the kits coming down the tree for the first time. This is in Big River Management Area. So her den is about 20 feet up the tree and they're coming down the tree head first. They've never touched the ground before. So it's probably pretty scary. That's Mama with the collar. And you can hear the kit crying. That's what their kits sound like. See, a little bit hesitant to come down. Here comes Mom with kit number 2. He's too scared to come down on his own. She ended up having 3 kits. And this one was the only one brave enough to come down by itself. So she's giving him a little bit of encouragement. See, she's looking a little bit rough. She's had a pretty tough spring trying to raise these 3. Fun fact about her, she's also blind in her left eye. And she managed to raise these guys just fine, get enough food for herself and for her baby. So pretty awesome. And that kind of wraps up our tracking and tagging portion. Now I'm going to move into our camera survey. So we have over 240 sites across the state. 17 of those are on sensitive properties. We've collected a ton of photos. On the left-hand side, you'll see the darker the red means more species that we've detected. Lighter the blue is less species. So we've got a nice spread across the whole state. For fisher detections, this is where we detect the most fishers. This is from the past 2 years. This is 4 seasons where fish are at in Rhode Island. So So we get a lot around big river area. Some of these are probably the same individual getting detected on the camera, but this is where our fish are at. So we get them all over. And on PNC properties, we've detected all these species in blue, except for black bear, beaver, and otter. Our study is tailored to get photos of bobcat and fisher. So we're not really tailoring our cameras to capture images of beaver and otter. I'm sure they are there at this properties. But on the left-hand side, you'll see the yellow dots indicate all of the areas where we have cameras at PNC properties. So we get quite a lot. We got all the squirrel species, we got mink, we've got both fox species, striped skunk, possum, bobcat, fisher, you name it, we've got it on camera there. So I wanted to share some of those photos with you. So here we've got a long-tailed weasel on the left side. This one was really cool because these are two different photos. On the left side's a long-tailed weasel, on the right side's a mink in the same exact spot. So you can see size difference there. Weasel's a lot smaller than that mink is. It's got a bobcat, beautiful bobcat. Nice buck. Here's a fisher in the daytime. Pretty rare to get those daytime photos of them. Here's one at night. In the summer, like I was mentioning, they got them monkey tails. A lot of their fur is dropped in the summer. It's a really pretty coyote, blonde coyote. Here's some raccoon babies. Another coyote. We get a lot of different diversity of coyote colors across the state. This one had me laughing really hard when I finally spotted him in the picture. The chipmunk with his mouth full of seeds. Another bobcat. There's a little fawn. This is a fisher that we tagged up in green. This is Rosalita. You can see the little shimmer of an ear tag on her right ear there. A gray squirrel. Little striped skunk rubbing his face on the log. The gray fox. This is a fisher kit climbing the tree. And a bobcat showing his belly, all the spots, rolling around. We put a scent lure out there. They like to roll in it. There's a coyote pup. Here's a hawk. I'm not great at hawk ID, but he caught a mouse and then sat in front of our camera and ate it. Coyote pup and a fisher. Fisher stand up like a little bear. Deer. They're starting to fight. Another bobcat. Here's a dark coyote. So you see kind of the suite of different coyotes that we've got. Raccoon. Beautiful red fox, the sunlight. There's another mink. A male fisher, and then this next one is a female fisher. So size comparison, male, female. This female is Queenie. We got her at Queen River Preserve. It's a raccoon. Another nice buck. The gray fox. And a flying squirrel flying at the camera. So those are all the photos some of the photos that we've collected at these sites. After listening to the presentation, if you thought, this is really cool, how can I help out? Well, first, you can share what you learned. So remember, fisher are weasels. They don't scream, they chuckle, and they're not crazy aggressive animals. They're rather elusive. If you see a fisher with a collar or ear tags, or even if you see a roadkill fisher, you can report it to me. So I have a report line on my website, and the link is in the bottom. If you see it, report it. That helps us find those animals again, and especially the roadkill fisher, it lets us know the fate of the fisher that we captured, and helps us better inform management decisions as well. And lastly, continue supporting land trusts. this research wouldn't be possible without the land trust and conservation agencies that we work with, especially the camera trapping survey. We would not have all these great photos to share with you. We wouldn't have this catalog of species across the state without this partnership. So please keep supporting them. The conservation they do is amazing, and it protects all of our wild spaces for not just us, but for our furry friends as well. I'd like to thank everybody who has been involved in the project, all of the land trusts that we work with, all of the local agencies, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management for even having this project possible for me to be working on. They mean the world to me, my lab, and all of the crew members and volunteers we've had out on the project, and people like you that support these land trusts so they can do these really cool things and support local research as well. With that, I'll take some questions. I probably ran way out of time, but yeah, thank you all.
Wow, Laken, that was great. Thank you so much. We have a couple questions, and these are great questions. So the first one, how are fisher able to deal with porcupines without seriously getting hurt?
That is a great question. So this is something that has been studied with how fish are actually attack a porcupine. So usually they'll run around it in circles and get it a little disoriented, and they'll smack it in the face as they're running in circles till they can flip it over. And as soon as they get it flipped over, they jump on its belly. So they have this really cool tactic that they've come up with for getting porcupine, because they're the only things here in the Northeast that will actually go after a porcupine. So we need them to keep them in check. So we don't have that many porcupine in Rhode Island.
Wow, great. And then Eleanor asks, do fishers have specific predators?
In the Northeast, no, just people. So out west and up in Canada, their main predator will be mountain lions, because mountain lions can actually chase them up into a tree. Wolves will also tangle with them, but not much else will mess with the fisher. They're kind of up there, apex predator, especially here in Rhode Island. Nothing's gonna mess with them except other fisher.
Great. And then Doug asks, what is the health of the fisher population in Rhode Island? Any pressures on them?
So they seem to be doing quite well. From our best guesses, the population was trending downward, but we think they're leveling out. I think when they came into the state, we had this really high spike population boom where they spread out all over the place. They reached their carrying capacity and they came back down. So right now they're kind of leveling out and finding where they fit in with the ecosystem. So I think they're doing pretty well. As far as pressures on them go, just people. There's a lot of roadkill that happens. There's a lot of legal take that happens. A lot of people don't like them in Rhode Island. So we end up hearing reports of people that have just shot fisher in their yard because they were there. So sadly, that's the main pressure on them right now.
Okay, thanks. And then what month are fishers typically born? How long do they stay with the mother fisher?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So I think I have a backup slide for this. Let me see if I can get it to go. I didn't know how much I would be able to cover. So fisher, they'll mate in March, and then they'll have their kits in about March, early April is whenever the kits will be born. They'll have about 1 to 6 is kind of their limit, but they can have, here it's typically 2 to 3. Yeah, the really cool thing for them though is that they have what's called delayed implantation. So this is similar to black bears. They will breed really early. So their breeding season happens right after the mom gives birth. So she'll give birth in a den in a tree, and then the males will come and they'll sit and wait for her to have to come out and feed, and they'll mate with her as soon as she comes down the tree right after she gave birth. It's kind of brutal, but they'll have that and it'll be delayed. Their pregnancy won't actually start until the following January, and then they'll start that active pregnancy and the cycle kind of continues.
All right, great. Got some more questions here. Carla asks, how many are there in Rhode Island and what do you project for the next 20 years?
That's a great question. Um, I don't have a very good answer for you. I haven't gone through a lot of the analyses, but my lab mate has been starting to go through some of that. The population, the best I can say is population seems pretty stable, and we anticipate it to kind of remain that way as long as there's not any crazy pressures put on them, as long as urbanization doesn't spread way too much. Yeah, it's hard to say what it's going to look like in 20 years. That's a great question. I'd like to know.
And then Jean asks, what are you most looking forward to discovering from your data when you have finished analyzing?
Ooh, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things I could say there. I think the part that I'm most excited about is I'd like to look at how they're moving through the landscape at different times of day. So if they're using people's backyards primarily at night, if they're avoiding different areas during the day because it's risky, we should be able to tell that from some of our data because we have those really fine scale GPS points. So we're able to track those throughout the night and day, and then also get their activity patterns throughout night and day. So I think that's what I'm most excited about.
Great. When the collars stop transmitting, do they fall off?
Great question. So the collars, they don't last too long, unless maybe a couple months, upwards of eight to 9 months. So the collars themselves were not equipped with any kind of mechanism to fall off. We used what we call a breakaway. So I stitched 2 pieces of leather together that's like soft leather in a certain way that the stitches will eventually dissolve over the course of the year, and it'll allow that collar to pop off. The reason we use that soft leather too is to allow it some stretch. So it allows the animal to grow with the collar. So we're not strangling them with the collar being too tight. There's room for it to grow, room for it to stretch. And even then, sometimes it'll stretch enough where they can slip it off their head themselves in a couple months. So we've had confirmations from our camera trapping that they have dropped their collar, they've got their ear tags on, no collar, which is always a great thing as a biologist. Be like, good, it's actually working, and they're not running around with a collar on the rest of their life.
Thanks. All right. So Lauren says, I really like the movement graphic. Were you able to identify some of the most valuable corridor habitat for movement of wildlife in Rhode Island?
So I hope too soon. I haven't got to analyze a lot of that data. We still have data coming in from this season, so I'm kind of waiting to jump on that till we have it all in. There have been some corridors, especially here in Narragansett, where I'm living. We had one that we caught kind of close to Town Beach, and he's been running up and down between Narrow River and the bay. And there was like one point where he always crossed from his northern part of his range to his southern part, is right at Brickley's Ice Cream. If you've been out there by Bonnet, right there, he's been crossing. And I live near this area, so I have seen coyotes, bobcat, and multiple fisher crossing in this kind of band in the road. And so that's one place that I've kind of identified. I've already identified that to the Narragansett Land Trust, so they're aware of it. As far as other areas, I haven't gotten to analyze the data, but hopefully we can. That was kind of one of the goals of the study.
Great. And then are fisher related to wolverine?
Yes.
Okay. Where do they sleep and for how long?
So it depends. So typically females, whenever they have kits, they'll sleep in the den in a tree with their kits. They don't sleep too long of stretches, but they'll take little naps periodically throughout the day. It's not like us where we sleep 8-hour block. They'll sleep for maybe like an hour at a time, go out hunting or just exploring. For the males, they are a little less picky about where they sleep. So they'll sometimes be in brush piles, or they'll sleep in little burrows in the ground or big cavities in a tree. Or oftentimes when I'm out tracking them, I'll come across one that's just hanging on a branch with all his paws hanging down and his tail sleeping on a branch. So yeah, they kind of sleep in trees mostly, but if they have a good brush pile or a burrow, they'll sleep in there as well.
Oh, okay, great. Kim asked, is there a trapping season? And if so, how many fishers are harvested per year?
Yes, fisher are trapped in Rhode Island still. We don't have too many trappers that are trapping in the state, especially for fisher. So I think last year's harvest was 20 individuals. 20 fisher were harvested, so around that number. And it's been around that number, maybe a little bit higher in the past couple of years. So not too many.
Okay, great. And then I have a question. Can they swim?
Yes, they can. That's a good question. Yeah, we actually had GPS points in the middle of the Chewett Reservoir, fisher swimming across one of the little arms of the reservoir there. So that was pretty cool to see. Yeah.
So that's all our questions. This has been really great, Laken. Thank you so much for sharing research and your passion with us. We're so thrilled that you're able to capture this data on some of our preserves, and it really highlights the importance of these protected areas. Laken's website is lakenganoe.com. She has a wealth of information on there. So I would encourage people to write that down. I see we have another question. Hey, John, hold on. Do you know of anyone who has domesticated fishers?
Not domesticated them per se, and I do not condone that. There was a researcher that had a couple fisher that he had trapped and he kept in captivity to monitor them and to learn a lot about their behavior, the reproductive cycle. It was all research focused, and that is the only one that I have heard. I don't condone of domesticating a lot of wildlife. So,
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank everybody for coming and participating. And just to give you a heads up, our next walk is our Super Bowl hike, and that will be held at Sachu West. I think it's about 3 o'clock, but that is on Super Bowl Sunday. So be on the lookout for that invitation. I will be there, as well as Lauren Donnelly Miller, or Lauren Miller Donnelly, who will be leading us on that hike. But thank you again so much, Laken, for presenting tonight. We're really thrilled that you could be here and do an amazing job sharing what you do. John, did you have any final words that you wanted to share?
Just adding to your thanks. Thanks so much. This was really fascinating, and congratulations on all your great research, and thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And just the factoid on the porcupines, that has my head spinning. So I'm really grateful for you. Thank you so much. So that concludes tonight's presentation. I have been recording this, and I will share that out with everyone probably early next week. Thank you and good night.